I can't even deny it. I would still pick it up.
Hey y'all, my name is Nat. I hope you're having a terrific day today. And for this video, I am going to be revisiting some 5-star authors. Alright, so before we get to anything bookish, make sure to hit like and subscribe down below, as well as tell me in the comments what is the last book that you gave a 5-star. So this video idea came up when I had a bit of a drought when it came to 5-star books, unfortunately. So I figured, what better way to hopefully predict a 5-star than return to authors who I've previously given 5 stars. However, because it's me, I had to make things a little bit more difficult for myself. I'm gonna up the stakes and go for authors where I've only read one of their books, and that first work was a 5-star. So when I started filming this video, I actually wasn't 100% certain on what books I was going to be picking up, because this was kind of a video that I started and then put on the back burner. Meaning at this point when I'm filming the intro, I've already finished it out, but I will go ahead and start y'all off with the 3 books that I ended up reading. First one being An Education in Malice by 𝗖cie Gibson. Now, not only did I give A Dowry of Blood 5 stars by this author, but also Education in Malice is technically considered a sequel in the same universe. Dowry of Blood is a Dracula retelling through the eyes of one of his brides, whereas An Education in Malice is a Carmilla retelling. So, you know, retellings of the 2 classic vampire stories. Education in Malice is more of a modern day retelling where we are following Carmilla and has a slightly unhealthy relationship with her professor. Yet when a new girl to their school, Laura, starts to take some of the attention of her professor, things between the 3 of them start to get a little bit more complicated. I was slightly nervous going into this one because I actually was hearing a lot of mid and negative reviews whenever it came out. A lot of people were expecting it to be very similar to Dowry, and I will say I think hearing so many of those negative reviews kind of tempered my expectations a little bit. Even still though, I was very excited for this. The next author I ended up revisiting was Rachel Harrison. The second book I picked up from her was Such Sharp Teeth, and I've heard pretty much only glowing reviews about this one. In this, we are following Rory, who has recently returned to her small town to help take care of her sister who is pregnant, and unfortunately her brother-in-law walked out. However, while in town, Rory ends up getting attacked by a werewolf. I knew at the very least I was going to enjoy Harrison's writing style, but I was also very hopeful to enjoy the discussions going on in the story, the themes that were woven within it. I was intrigued to see how she was going to work that with a werewolf storyline. The final author I returned to, I actually ended up going in a pretty different direction with her second book. The first book I read by Kingfisher was Bryony and Roses, a Beauty and the Beast retelling that I hadn't actually heard much about, and I ended up really enjoying it. I loved her character work. I really enjoyed the humor in her work and also how she did this retelling. However, that one was more fantastical, and so I decided to try out one of her more horror-leaning works with The Hollow Places, which did eventually find out is also a retelling. Kingfisher was influenced by The Willows by Algernon Blackwood. The reason it was on my own TBR though was because somebody sold it to me as adult Gravity Falls horror, and I'm a big Gravity Falls fan. Of course I wanted to read this. In this one, we're following Kara, who's working at her uncle's museum, which is kind of a collection of mysterious oddities, and she ends up finding a hole behind one of the walls that ends up leading her into this bunker and eventually different realities, but it seems like Kara is not the only one there. Like I was saying, pretty different direction from a Beauty and the Beast retelling, but I was really hopeful that this author's writing style would just sell it for me. So on that note, that's it for me, but you guys can follow along as I find out whether or not these authors are going to give me more than 1 5-star.
Hi my friends, so I have hit the halfway point into An Education in Malice by 𝗖cie Gibson, and unfortunately, almost immediately, I was let down by the fact that the writing in comparison to Dowry just does not have the same magic. It doesn't have the same gothic ambiance. I do think An Education in Malice can fit into the dark academia trope, but the atmosphere is just nothing in comparison to Dowry, and that's such a shame because I love Dowry. I love the writing style there, but this isn't really hitting it. However, I will admit, when it comes to like the actual story, I am having a good time. So this is a Carmilla retelling, and I have never actually read Carmilla. It is on my TBR. I want to, but it is a classic. The language in classics tends to just not work for me personally. So I've been nervous to actually pick it up. Though I do know the basics of the story. So with that, I do know there's some romantic tension going on between Carmilla and Laura. And even if I didn't know that, I mean, you really don't need to know it because you can feel it between these two. The tension that is there is just delicious. At the start of the story, once they interact, Carmilla makes sure Laura knows that they are academic rivals. Like, they are not going to get along. Literally up until the first kind of, I wouldn't even call it romantic, but like sensual moment between them, Carmilla is still like, no, we don't like each other. I hate you. And then realizes like, oh, okay, you're attracted to me. That's what's happening here. And I loved it. There's also this aspect to the story with Carmilla and Laura having a inappropriate relationship with their professor, their poetry professor, and the strange reliance that Carmilla initially has on her and how we see that unfold. I've really enjoyed watching. Maybe enjoyed isn't the right word to say, but I've been very engrossed in watching that unfold. As Laura is invited into this strange relationship, things get all the more unsettling, but also like a lot more alluring. So that's a parallel I can draw to Dowry that I am really loving, and does showcase to me that Gibson can really write a toxic relationship in a way that makes you thirsty to see more, but also hate it for the characters involved. On top of that, I also think Gibson has done a fantastic job of just creating the characters of Carmilla and Laura to be like such perfect foils to one another, while also putting them in this situation with the uncomfortable power imbalance that La Fontaine has put them in the middle of. Just at the halfway point, we're finally starting to dive into how integral vampirism is going to be in the plot, and it makes me so thirsty for more. Pun intended. I'm really excited to see what's going to happen next. An important element of the story that I'm not loving, but it's not because I don't think it's well done, it's just because it's not my cup of tea, is the poetry. La Fontaine teaches poetry, Laura and Carmilla write poetry. Personally, I'm just not a poetry person, unfortunately. There's a lot of references to poems. I assume they're references. They could also totally just be made up by Gibson and I wouldn't know. And then there's excerpts of poems, which again, could be real, could not be. I wouldn't know one way or the other. The inclusion of those just doesn't really add anything to the story for me. Like, it's there. It doesn't really affect my feelings one way or the other. Right now, unfortunately, estimated rating is about a 4-star. I really don't know if this will be a 5-star unless Gibson just like really knocks the relationship bits out of the park in the latter half. I'm not sure. Hey guys, so I finished out An Education in Malice by S.T. Gibson, and unfortunately this was not another 5-star, but I did like it. I almost feel as though this book wasn't as clean polished as A Dowry of Blood is. For example, the relationship in the story between Carmilla and Laura just isn't as all-consuming as the polycule in Dowry. I was convinced by first love between these two. It wasn't believable to me that they were so head over heels for each other like they were discussing. That said, I did believe the reliance that was bred between them because of the situation they find themselves in. And then especially once some of the more wild things started happening, it really made sense that they clung to one another for comfort. I did enjoy that element of the story. This did have some similar themes in relationships to Dowry when it came to like that power imbalance I talked about before between La Fontaine and Carmilla, as well as with Laura, honestly. However, I felt like that topic was presented and yet never really dived into in a way that felt satisfying for me in comparison to like the reflection done in Dowry. Again, it's so hard not to compare these two books. It really is, because they're set in the same universe, they have a lot of the same themes, there's even a character who's the same, but it's just not, just doesn't hit. I also felt like the actual plot was lacking. It took a long time for that to really be unveiled. Once it was set up, it moved so fast. I did feel like it tied back to the themes presented, but once again, I just didn't think there was enough time to dive into those and really explore them with these characters. So it didn't feel fleshed out. It didn't feel like it wrapped up in the most satisfying way. It was over really quickly. Again, I did like a lot of this book though. The spice was pretty well done, but excluding the spice, a lot of the story feels like a more young adult version of Dowry. It just doesn't feel like it has the same punch. much. So unfortunately, this one was only 4 stars, and that is a shame, though I do plan to eventually check out more of Gibson's work, and I would be so intrigued to see if they plan to write another book set in the same universe, because I can't even deny it, I would still pick it up. Hello, my friends. I've actually surpassed the halfway point into Such Sharp Teeth by Rachel Harrison, and barring like one issue I have with this book, I'm loving it. The one main problem I am having is that it seems like miscommunication is going to be utilized for some issues between different characters, namely with our main character Rory and her twin sister Scarlett. Like, there's something going on with Scarlett's background that she won't reveal to Rory. And then on the opposite side, Rory and Ian, the love interest, I mean, she obviously is having to hide this new part of herself from him, and she doesn't know how he's going to react to it. So like, it's a little fair there, but with the sister it's a little bit more frustrating. That said though, I'm loving everything else about this book. I'm really enjoying it. The reason I didn't stop at the halfway point is because I just didn't want to stop. I wanted to keep going. As you can see, I've been annotating this a ton. I went into this knowing I was going to enjoy the commentary going on in this story. Yeah, I absolutely am. I'm genuinely impressed at how well nuanced Harrison has managed to make this discussion, because it's not just a parallel between, you know, Rory turning into a werewolf and like womanhood. There's also discussions around autonomy, having that autonomy violated in a way that is traumatic, but also for Scarlett, I mean, her autonomy is also sort of being taken away because of her pregnancy. Her body is not her own anymore. It's not just hers. She has to share it with someone. I also like the talk around pregnancy and how Scarlett feels so uncomfortable with the fact that she's not really happy about being pregnant and the little bits of struggle we're seeing from her. But there are so many things that she realizes she's losing or she's missing out on because of this new aspect of her body. The discussions going on with that, phenomenal. But I also wasn't really expecting mommy issues to be brought into this. It was kind of cool to see how Harrison sort of worked the different relationships that each of the girls had with their mother and how that's also sort of impacted different aspects of their lives that tie in to their autonomy. Like I said, this is just so well nuanced. It's really well layered in how Harrison is presenting it and constantly like adding little caveats that also tie into the main theme. The writing around it might not be the most subtle, but I also don't really mind it because then we get some like very impactful, hard-hitting quotes. The romance itself is actually really cute as well. First off, it's kind of like second chance romance. Rory knew Ian from when they were in middle school and high school because her sister dated his best friend. And even though Ian always had a crush on her, she never really tried to go anywhere near that. They're grown up, and even though she has constantly kind of kept a case around her heart and really pushed back on any romantic feelings she's ever had, she's having a very hard time doing that with Ian. And I love how that's kind of bringing up some more discussions around the trauma where he might like her, but he doesn't understand everything going on with her right now. She's so fearful to open up to him about it because she doesn't know if he's going to continue being interested once he knows the full truth. Like I said, I'm just really liking everything Harrison's tying into the story. I don't know how she went from like a werewolf book and then managed in all of these different topics so well, but I'm incredibly impressed at it. One downside, I did pick this up for a book club I do in person, thinking that there would be a whodunit element as to the original werewolf, the one who bit Rory and turned her. That's not been very prevalent, unfortunately. There's been like little hints to it here and there. I am waiting for that aspect of the plot to be more on the front burner. Really though, this is going so phenomenally. I'm not even a little bit surprised. I'm so glad that I had so many excuses to read this book this year. As I said, I have a million annotations going on. I've already ran out of tab colors for one of them, but chances are the rest of this book will continue to look the same. Hello, my friends. So I've officially finished out Such Sharp Teeth, and I freaking love this book. On top of that, I got to take it to the Rachel Harrison event, and she signed it. It was so good, y'all. So good. She is so nice. So incredibly well layered and nuanced. There's just so many discussions when it comes to womanhood in this book, and looking at it through the lens of our main character turning into a werewolf. The horror isn't just Rory's transforming, it's also in the realities of
these situations. It's awful, but it was so addicting. I really liked Rory as the main character. I do think some of the plot did hinge on miscommunication between characters, but it wasn't so much so that I was aggravated by it. It more just seemed like all these characters had their walls up and were like trying to protect themselves, and whenever those finally came down, were explained, it honestly did make sense. It felt very human and genuine. As to who the actual werewolf was, I'm not gonna say it was insanely shocking because I had a list of people and reasons XYZ of why I thought they were the werewolf. This person was on my list, but at the same time, it did make sense. It wasn't any of the other characters that could have been more predictable. And then how it was handled at the end of the book, I really, really liked that. The little romance that was here was very cute. I just felt like I was getting giddy along with Rory. I loved this. I don't know if I can quite say like bright 5 stars, but it's definitely like a really good 4.5. It was really, really good. I am gonna say here, Rachel Harrison's probably a 5-star author for me. I have all of her other books on my TBR now, especially after that event. I am so excited to read more of them. This just made me even more excited. I can't freaking wait.
Hey guys, so I've started into my next 5-star author's second book. This time I went with Kingfisher with The Hollow Places. Going into this one, I hoped that we would still have some of Kingfisher's humor, and already I can say yes, it's definitely here. I do appreciate the fact that she shifted the humor so it fits more with the setting. It is a little bit more grounded initially, but now we're kind of getting into the more horror elements, and it's definitely kind of playing on the whole like wacky museum angle, which our main character works at right now. Bryony Roses was a fairy tale fantasy romance. This is a eldritch horror sort of story, and it's just so different, but I'm really liking this. I've heard a lot of positive things about Kingfisher's work across the board, and the two camps she tends to go in are like fun fantasy and creepy gothic horror. So I'm glad I'm trying out both of her stuff to see, you know, is she a 5-star author for me in both of these genres? And thus far, this one is going quite well. I picked it up initially because somebody sold it as like horror Gravity Falls, and starting into it, yeah, it does kind of feel like that.
We're heading into town right now to interrogate the murderer.
We have an axe!
This seems like the kind of thing a responsible parent wouldn't want you doing. Good thing I'm an uncle.
Our main character, Kara, unfortunately has gone through a divorce recently. It wasn't even particularly nasty, but it is still emotionally a hit. While closing one night, she ends up coming across this mysterious hole, and she, as well as her friend Simon, who works at the coffee shop next door, decide to go exploring in it. And they come to find this like whole new land inside this wall, and it's all these different islands with different bunkers and different doors to maybe other realities. That's kind of just the theory. They've gone into the hole and now they're starting to explore and just see what kind of stuff is going on down here, but they've already come across some creepy things like this abandoned school bus that looks just slightly wrong. They also keep coming across these like creepy messages, like they can hear you thinking and pray they're hungry are the two. It's wonky, it's weird, but I'm really liking it so far. It's going quite well. I'm so excited to continue reading this. Honestly, I'm filming this update so I can continue reading this, which is always a really good sign.
Hey guys, so I've officially finished out The Hollow Places by Kingfisher, and I liked this. I did. It's really, it's very much not my usual taste. It was weird. I do think the pitch of Gravity Falls horror is kind of perfect. The horror was not what I was anticipating at the same time. It was still disturbing. It was still wild. Love Kingfisher's humor. She's so freaking funny. I totally understand why everybody keeps recommending her stuff. Her writing style is just so consumable. It's so bingeable. I really did blast through this very quickly. I like that the main relationship in the story is completely platonic. It is very much a really strong friendship, and I loved seeing these two characters interact. Kara and Simon are hilarious together. Oh my gosh, I love them. I love the care that Kara has for the museum because of her uncle. There's even some really funny interactions with her ex-husband. I
Oh my god, those were great. I was living off of the interactions between them and how much she just did not care. I really appreciated the recurring references to like Narnia and Alice in Wonderland, seeing as how this is a portal fantasy story. They just felt so perfectly slotted in, especially because, you know, like everybody knows those stories. I think a lot of people connect with those stories when they're younger, and so it's interesting to kind of take something like that, you know, you have so much nostalgia tied towards, and then do this really dark twist on it. So impressed with Kingfisher's work in that regard. I did drag a little bit with this in the middle, just a little bit, and I think it's, well, like once we're finally starting to get answers, okay, yeah, I got this. But wait, what? It's like they made sense to me, but I also had more questions. I think this is one of those situations where like I got answers, but I didn't get enough answers. Like I wanted more. I like ambiguous endings. I like endings where everything is explained to us. But this kind of like lands somewhere in the middle, and I didn't really love that about it. I do think it's an appropriate ending for the book because most of the ride, Kara is completely lost, Simon's completely lost, so it makes sense that, you know, once everything rounds out, they don't really fully understand what happened either. But like, I'm not satisfied with that. I want actual answers if you're going to give me answers. I had remaining questions still. The final climax is both so terrifying. It kind of goes back to that whole like taking something from your childhood and like amping up the freak factor. But also there were moments in the climax that were like so sweet and comforting because of like what we've seen of Kara's past and the experiences she's had with this museum. I really was impressed at the way Kingfisher built things throughout the story, and then how all of those ended up mattering in the end. That was so well done. So like, I don't think this was a 5-star, unfortunately. I think really it was a 4-star, but I did really enjoy it. I'm definitely going to continue checking out more of this author's work. I think I have like 2 more of her books on my shelves already, so I'm definitely going to keep reading this author. I definitely want to try more of her horror books because I don't think the other ones I've heard about are similar to this. Even if they are, I do think I'd still enjoy them. I'm definitely going to be here for whatever characters she creates. I'm definitely going to be here for her humor again, so absolutely we'll be checking out more from this author.
Hey guys, so I actually was in the middle of editing this video when I realized I never filmed an outro of it. I never filmed an exit. This is future Nat to do that. In the end, this video may not have been nearly as successful as I was hoping when I first came up with the idea. Overall though, I do think it still went pretty well. I mean, I had 2 very solid 4-star books, and then I did have another 5-star from an author. I know technically it was a 4.5. I made that specification, but I'm gonna say 5-star for the sake of the video. So this was a lot of fun, and it did show me that I do enjoy these authors' works, and I should continue to prioritize them, even if they're not necessarily multiple 5-star authors. Chances are I still will have a very good time with them. So on that note, that's it for today, y'all. Thank you so much for coming to my channel. I really appreciate it. Make sure to hit like and subscribe down below. If you made it all the way to the end of this video, leave me a star emoji in the comments. I have all my socials as well as a few ways you can support me, including a Patreon linked in my description. I come out with videos on Monday and Friday, but until then, I hope you continue to have a terrific day. Love you. Bye.